But tonight we're talking about rest and epigenetics. We're going through the 8 laws of health, and we're always all the way down to the next to the last one, which is rest. And so as I've gone through this, I've wanted to give you 2 things. One is a solid ground of science for these laws of health, and the other is a biblical ground, because I believe that all 8 of these principles can be found within the first 2 chapters of the Bible. And this one is no exception, because in Genesis chapter 2, verse 2, God created the earth in 6 days, and then on the 7th day, what did He do?
Rested.
He rested. So the Sabbath God instituted all the way back in the Garden of Eden. Okay? So that is the principle of rest all the way back in the very beginning. So we have in our bodies something called a circadian rhythm. And if you see here on the slide, the last bullet point down here at the bottom, the term circadian comes from the Latin phrase circa diem, which means around the day. And our circadian rhythms, this is what we know as our sleep-wake or day-night cycle. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about this later. But the main hormones that we think about, there's others, but the main ones that we think about in regards to the circadian rhythm are melatonin and cortisol. Melatonin rises in the evening to make us sleepy, and then the levels fall throughout the night, and then cortisol levels go down in the evening, and then they begin to rise toward the morning, so that helps to arouse us and wake us up. But did you know, besides the circadian rhythm, that we also have what's called a circaseptan rhythm? I got an itchy nose here this evening. Here is you can find this information on that link there. But humans have this weekly rhythm, so that our bodies actually, in order to function properly, require rest 1 day in 7. And that's exactly, God knew that. He's the creator, and He gave us that right at the very beginning of time. So let's look at sleep in your genes, because we're getting into where we want to lay the groundwork scientifically. And I do have a little short video clip in just a minute. But when I was researching this, I found study after study after study after study that shows the connection between sleep quality and our genes and our DNA and our epigenetic, our expression of our genes. So this study said sleeping less than 6 hours at night causes substantial, not just any small change, but this is substantial change in the activity of genes that govern the immune system, metabolism, sleep and wake cycles, and the body's response to stress, suggesting that poor sleep could have a broad impact on our long-term well-being. So the way that we sleep really has a lot to do with the quality of our life and our health overall. These changes affect over 700 genes. And so it's not just a small number of genes that we're looking at here. This may shed light on the biological mechanisms that raise the risk of a host of ailments, including heart disease, diabetes, obesity, stress, depression, in people who get too little sleep. And we're going to talk about how much is enough, how much is not enough, as we go through this talk tonight. So here is another study. And again, we're showing how the lack of sleep affects our genes. Sleep deprivation is associated with several changes to the epigenome. This is our genetic profile, particularly with regard to DNA methylation. You remember we talked about how DNA methylation has to do with switching on and switching off these genes for disease. That's what we've been talking about throughout this series. Histone modifications encoding RNA. Some of that stuff is a little highbrow, but I put it out there for information. It's well known that sleep deprivation alters numerous signaling pathways in the body, which could regulate epigenetic mechanisms. So in other words, if we're not sleeping enough, it goofs up the pathways that tell our genes how to behave, when to switch on, when to switch off for disease or for wellness. Here, this was an interesting study. I enjoyed reading part of this one. It said in overnight on-site call participants after acute sleep deprivation, DNA repair gene expression was decreased and DNA breaks were increased. Sleep deprivation in shift workers is associated with adverse health consequences. We'll talk more about shift work in just a little bit. Increased DNA damage has been linked to the development of chronic disease. The study demonstrates that disrupted sleep is associated with DNA damage. A lot of the research that I looked at when I was preparing for this was from Dr. Matthew Walker, and we're going to watch a short video clip from him. I found that fascinating. So, lack of sleep, good quality sleep, turns on the genes for inflammation, for cancer production, and all these other things with cardiovascular disease. It turns off your immune system, the genes that support your immune system. So sleep is no small potato chip. I mean, this is really important. You know, we're going to talk about how to have better sleep too. Here's some more results of lack of sleep. Hypertension. That's an interesting thing. I was listening to a lecture today about how it actually causes hypertension, and there was just so much information I had to kind of wade through and just cherry pick and pull out, enough to share with you. It also contributes to diabetes type 2, as we heard, cardiovascular disease, depression, cancer, delayed reactions. Think about if you're sleep deprived and you drive. And I think I have it in a slide coming up in just a minute, but 1/3 of all vehicle accidents have sleep deprivation as a direct cause. 1/3. That's huge. Memory issues, impaired thinking, impaired moral function. So sleep has a lot to do with where you end up in the future. Anger, increased workplace accidents, impaired productivity, and migraines. This is a study that this particular doctor did, Dr. Matthew Walker. They did a study. They took subjects and they gave them, I think this was the one where they divided them into two groups. Yeah, they had two groups, but we're just going to talk about the group that got the short night of sleep. They only gave them 5 hours of sleep. And they looked at the blood of these people, and he said that a doctor could actually diagnose you as pre-diabetic after 1 week of short nights of 5 hours of sleep or less. They could actually see in your blood enough of a change to diagnose you as pre-diabetic. That's pretty significant. A young male with 1 week of similar sleep deprivation has a drop in his testosterone that basically ages him about 10 years. He will have the same testosterone levels as a man 10 years his senior. So that's not something that a lot of young fellows really want to face, although many of the young kids, I think, today think they're invincible. They can stay up all night, party all night, do whatever all night, and work all day and go on 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Well, you may be able to function, but as we'll see in this presentation tonight, you're not promoting health. And I think we can see that already. Blood pressure, heart rate, all of these elevate when you don't have good quality sleep. Let's look at, you remember, I forget which lecture it was, but we talked about leptin and ghrelin, the satiety hormone that tells you you've had enough to eat, and the hunger hormone that tells you, no, you need more food. You remember that? We talked about that in a previous talk. Well, after a short night of just 4 to 6 hours of sleep, leptin, which is the one that says you've had enough, you don't need any more food, that is decreased by 18% after a short night's sleep. And the ghrelin, which tells you you're hungry, is increased by 28%. So your brakes are broken and your accelerator is stuck when you have a short night of sleep when it comes to your appetite. And typically what they've noticed when people have this short night and they've studied, this particular thing, overall hunger increases by 26%, and people tend to crave the like refined carbohydrates, sugary, processed, and even salty foods, junk food, basically, is what we crave. So you can see how these short nights of sleep can contribute to obesity, because your brakes are not working and your accelerator is stuck. Okay? All right? The reward center in the brain shows increase after sleep deprivation, and this makes us more vulnerable to addictions. And so it perpetuates this process. And also the prefrontal cortex, which is where our moral decision making and our brakes and our ability to say no to things, this is inhibited when we have a short night of sleep. Okay? Short sleep also, we see a 64% increase in all-cause mortality. 64%. Microsleeps and drowsy driving, here's that statistic I mentioned a minute ago, cause up to 1/3 of all motor vehicle accidents. And short nights of sleep are one of the main drivers of Alzheimer's. So if your brain is not having time, we actually have a detox pathway in our brains called the glymphatic system. And this is working at night to detox our brain and to prune out things that we don't need and to clean it. And it's this detox pathway, the glymphatics. And this is broken when we have these short nights of sleep. We don't have this brain detox. Let's talk a little bit about the stages of sleep. Who's heard of REM sleep, rapid eye movement? Okay, most people have heard about that. There's a little bit of variation in what I found among the researchers with this, but basically there's 4 stages of sleep. And the first stage, they call it N1, that's basically stage 1. That's a very short stage of sleep right at the beginning of when we go to sleep, where we're kind of asleep, sort of, we kind of hear what's around us, but it's beginning to fade off and we're a little foggy. You know what I'm talking about. That's that first phase, okay? That only lasts up to 5 minutes. And that particular stage is typically not repeated during the night unless you wake up again, okay? If you wake up during the night, you do have to repeat this stage 1 of sleep. Stage 2 sleep lasts 10 to 60 minutes. This is when the brain activity and the heart and everything kind of slows down. The body temperature drops. This is a little bit deeper sleep. You can still be aroused fairly easily, but you're definitely not aware of what's going on around you. And then N3 or stage 3 lasts about 30 minutes. This is where your brain goes into the delta brainwave, where the brainwaves, your memory processing and everything this is where that takes place, where the memories are filed from the day. And the interesting thing to me is that, and I'll talk about this in just a minute when we talk about sleep cycles, but growth hormone is released throughout the day and throughout the night, but in the first sleep cycle of the night, before midnight, we have a burst of growth hormone. Now, you might think as adults we don't really need growth hormone because it's what turns kids into adults. But we do, because growth hormone is responsible for body repairs and also even the brain repairs. So we do need that growth hormone. But when we get that boost of it, it really helps with the protein. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about it a little bit more when I get to the sleep cycles. But that burst of growth hormone, just kind of remember that, because that's very important. And if we miss the first sleep cycle, which I'll define sleep cycles in just a minute, if we miss the first sleep cycle before midnight, then we may have a burst of growth hormone, but it comes at the wrong time metabolically because our body clock has moved past that. So if we don't get to bed before midnight and get one of our main sleep cycles completed before midnight, we're missing that burst of growth hormone. So we're not getting the body repairs and the production of proteins and things that we would normally get. Okay, and then in 4, or stage 4, is where we have that REM sleep. That's the rapid eye movement. This is also called dream sleep, because this is where we're actually dreaming. The brain is very active. It's not slow like the previous stages. It's very active. Okay, now let's talk about the sleep cycles just a little bit. With the REM sleep, with the dreams, this is when our brain is kind of filing memories and committing memories that need to be kept to long-term memory instead of just short-term, it's going to pass away. So the REM sleep is very important. So one sleep cycle, and we'll look at a graphic in just a minute, we cycle from stage 2 to stage 4 throughout the night in about 90-minute cycles. And we really need 5 to 6 of those cycles during the night to be considered to have a good, healthy night's rest. Okay? Most people don't get that. It's also called the ultradian sleep cycle. You remember circadian, circaseptan, and then we have ultradian. That's the cycle of our sleep throughout the night. Here is a graphic that we can see. So the N1 is when we're just beginning to fall asleep. The N2 is kind of light sleep. We're definitely not aware of what's going on around us, but it's easy to wake us up. And then when we go into the deep sleep, N3, that's when you've just about got to kick the person to wake them up. Okay, that's the really deep stuff. Okay, and then vivid dreaming is the REM sleep. That is one cycle that typically takes, again, about 90 minutes, and you need to do this 5 to 6 times throughout the night. Again, typically we don't repeat the first stage, the N1, unless we wake up. And we'll talk about waking up in just a minute. Okay, here's where we're going to talk about growth hormone again. Again, growth hormone is released in our bodies throughout the day, throughout the night, in small portions. But again, it's that burst that happens in the first sleep cycle before midnight that we're looking at, because it's important for the you get my tongue mixed up here. It's important for the synthesis having trouble saying that tonight, of proteins that are needed to build these memories that our body is trying to store. Okay, and if we miss that, again, we've missed it, because our body clock and melatonin levels and everything have moved past that. So we really need to get that first complete sleep cycle in before midnight. So burning the candle late, it's not, you're not getting what you need here to develop good memories. And this is why we can see a big contributing factor with Alzheimer's disease. And it's also been shown that people who have short sleep you've probably heard of the beta amyloid plaque buildup that people have in their brains with Alzheimer's. You get a lot more of that with these short nights of sleep. Okay. REM, REM, or dream sleep. Dreaming, again, we mentioned this earlier, it's a way of cataloging and connecting experiences and knowledge. This is where our body is kind of taking knowledge and things that we've learned and turning it into wisdom. What can I do with that knowledge? This is part of dreaming. You ever had one of those dreams that you're like, that makes totally no sense? That was the stupidest, weirdest dream. But your body is trying to file things. It's pulling things from the past, it's making new memories, it's connecting things that you've learned. So this is a very, very important part of sleep. And as I was thinking about this, I thought about a Bible passage, and I just found it right before we came over here. No, that's not the one. It says in Psalm 16:7, "My reins instruct me in the night season." The reins in the Bible it's talking about is the thoughts. My reins instruct me in the night seasons. So I think of that as the REM, when our body is creating these new memories and things. We have an experience every year in short nights, because just losing 1 hour of sleep can cause significant issues. And that experiment is called daylight savings time. When we lose an hour in the spring, there is a 24% increase in heart attacks the following day. Then when we go back to the fall and we gain that hour back, there's a 24% decrease in heart attacks the next day. It's the same percentage. So, I mean, that's pretty significant to me, that you have the same percentage increase and decrease when they change this time. This is just a big experiment, you know, to see how many people will obey this. There are states that don't change time. I don't know what all of them are. I know Arizona doesn't change time. My granddad never changed time. He was in southern Louisiana, and he was a dairy farmer. And I asked him one day, I said, "Papa, how come you don't change time?" "My cows don't know they changed the time." So he never changed time. He stayed on the same time year round. So natural killer cells, these are the cells that identify the bad guys and eliminate them. But with a loss of sleep of 2 to 3 hours, natural killer cells are decreased by 70%. There goes your immune system. Okay? It's very important to get our sleep. The World Health Organization now classes nighttime shift work as a probable carcinogen. I used to work nights. I remember the first, it was the second. When I was young and I first started working nights, I had a hard time because I'm an early morning person. I turn into, by 9 o'clock, I'm useless. And I'm up early. I've just always been that way. Well, when I had my first nursing job, of course, every new nurse goes on night shift, you know, and so I did. And I was really struggling. So I really I developed some bad health habits. That was before I knew about health like I do now. And I got to the point where I would drink probably 3 cups of coffee during the night. It was like half coffee, half milk, and 2 or 3 packs of sugar. And that's what I would drink. Or I would drink a 6-pack of Dr. Pepper or Diet Coke while I was at work on that shift. And then, as I was leaving work, I would stop and get a Benadryl and take it because I had a 40-minute drive home, so that by the time I got home, I was starting to get sleepy. And then I thought, Sudafed makes me stay awake. So I got to the point where I would stop at the pharmacy and pick up a Sudafed on the way in, and I was bouncing off the walls all night. And so that's where I was taking uppers and downers.
Oh dear.
Yes, I had no idea what I was doing to myself. But this is what I did to try to function on night shift. And thankfully, maybe 9 or 10 months into my career, I moved to evening shift, which was better. The second time this happened to me, that I got put on night shift, I had been out of nursing for a little bit, and I went back to a hospital, and they put me on a med-surg ward at night. And again, I had like a 40 or 45-minute drive home. And one morning on the way home, I woke up in the ditch on that side of the road with traffic coming. How I missed traffic, I have no idea. I don't know what happened. I just woke up because the car was just, going nuts. And so this is real. I mean, I'm very grateful that the Lord preserved me through all of my craziness. Let's talk a little bit about naps, because naps can actually be a good thing, but they can be a bad thing too. Let's qualify that. There's a chemical in our bodies called adenosine, and this builds up throughout the day and creates a sleepiness, so that by the time we hit night, we are sleepy. That, along with the melatonin rise. And so if we take a nap in the day, it uses up some of that adenosine, so that we tend not to be as sleepy later in the day. People who struggle with insomnia really should not nap. because you need all of this adenosine, you need the sleepiness in the evening. But if you must nap, it really needs to be before 2 p.m. and limited to only about 20 minutes. Because if you go into this deep sleep cycle and this REM, when you wake up, typically you're way more groggy and you feel worse than you did before you took your nap. Okay? I think that's pretty much what was on this slide. Caffeine actually hijacks the adenosine receptors in our brain so that they don't work, they don't function. So if we take in caffeine, even if you take caffeine early in the day, caffeine has a very long effect on the body. Okay? So even by evening time, you could still be being affected because it's blocking the adenosine receptors in the brain. What are some sleep snatchers? Things that ruin our sleep. Let's look at this. Late evening eating, especially of large meals. If you need to eat in the evening, it really should be at least 2 hours before bedtime. And it should be something light, like popcorn, fruit, a bowl of tomato soup, something very light, very easy to digest. Okay? Late evening vigorous exercise is going to ramp up your body so that you're not ready to go into sleep. Blue lights from screens. I talked about this before. I have now set my phone. You see how my phone has kind of an orange hue instead of a blue hue? You can set your phone to night. I think they call it night mode. But it puts more of an orange tone to the screen as opposed to a blue tone. If you remember when we talked about sunlight, I mentioned that, does anybody remember when blue light is most abundant during the day cycle?
Morning.
In the morning. Yes, blue light is most abundant, excuse me, I think it's the first 2 or 3 hours of the day. So if we get out in the morning, we get the natural light in our eyes, that's going to help set this circadian rhythm that we have. It's going to help to regulate our melatonin levels. Blue light in the morning helps your melatonin to go down and your cortisol to come up, and that's what you want. Okay? And then when you have more of an orange type of light towards the evening, or no light at all, really, or dim light, that's going to help to lower your cortisol and raise your melatonin levels. Okay? So if you must be on a screen, TV, computer, cell phone, in the evening, use that night mode, but try not to be on your screen at least an hour before bedtime. Okay? Sleep apnea, snoring, obesity, because either obesity or like bodybuilders that have the great big neck, when you lay down, that's gravity pulls on all that mass and it shuts off the airway. Okay, I should have put a picture of that in here, but I didn't do that. Lack of adequate exercise and sunlight during the day is another sleep snatcher. What are some sleep helps that we can do? One of the things is regularity. To go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every day, even on the weekend. Don't sleep in on the weekend. That confuses our body system, okay? And while I'm on the topic of confusing the body system, if you're lying in bed awake, you can't go to sleep, and you're laying there, you're fighting it, and you want to go to sleep, it's a temptation to pick up this and scroll through or whatever, and just stay there in the bed and fight and be mad because you can't sleep. If you've laid there for 20 or 30 minutes and you can't go back to sleep, get up and leave the bedroom and go do something else. Because our brains begin to associate the bed with not the place that we sleep, but the place that we wrestle and struggle and are frustrated and look at our phones and all that. Our brains are very associative. So if you get up and leave and go do something else, listen to a podcast, listen to a sermon, listen to the Bible. I guarantee you if you listen to the Bible, you will get sleepy, because the devil doesn't want you to hear that. So Anyway, those are things that you can do to help. Darkness in the evening and at night. No clock faces in the bedroom. You don't need to know what time it is. If you need an alarm, you can turn that clock face away so that you don't have that light. You want your bedroom to be dark, very dark. And if you can reduce the lights in your house by at least half an hour before bedtime, or even 2/3 if you can, reduce them, have a more dark ambient type situation there, where it kind of signals the body that it's time to wind down, it's time to slow down, it's time to get ready to sleep. That will help. A bedroom temperature, this was from Dr. Matthew Walker. He said they found that, who here can go to sleep when it's hot? Who here can go to sleep when it's cold or cooler? Yes. If your bedroom is between 65 to 68 degrees, that fosters better sleep than if it's warmer or colder. 30 minutes of meditation, prayer, Bible study prior to bedtime is very good to help the brain begin to calm down, to slow down. Avoid caffeine, alcohol, or eating. Alcohol blocks REM sleep. Alcohol does make some people sleepy, but it's a sedative. And again, the sedated sleep is not natural sleep. And again, you don't get that REM, which we've seen is so important. Put your phones and computers on night mode, no screen time 1 hour before bedtime, and blue light and brain stimulation are the problems with these things. How many of you have gotten a text from a friend at bedtime? And you answer it, and then you get into a conversation, and you're carrying on, and then your brain wakes up, and you forgot about being sleepy, right? That's happened to me so many times with my work. Somebody's got a problem. Help! So-and-so's got such. What do I do? And do I not help them? Yeah. So another thing is to fix snoring and sleep apnea. If you have sleep apnea, it's almost a prescription for hypertension. But if you can control the snoring and the sleep apnea, it's a big, huge help to lowering the blood pressure, to eliminating that risk of cardiovascular disease, obesity, and diabetes. We talked earlier about mouth taping. Remember when I put the little piece of tape? It works. It really works. There's also devices you can put over your nose. There's sleep positions that you can learn about. There's exercises to strengthen the neck muscles that you can learn about. You can find all these on YouTube because I'm not going to demonstrate them because they're kind of funny. So here is the passage that I just dropped in here before we came. Psalm 127 verse 2 says, He giveth His beloved sleep. So sleep is a gift. And it's a gift that I believe is very restorative. And Dr. Matthew Walker, I heard him repeatedly say that he believes that sleep is the greatest health hack, the greatest natural health hack that we have at our fingertips to increase our lifespan and the quality of our life. So I hope that this was an encouragement to work on your sleep hygiene and hopefully try to get a better night's sleep tonight.